Back in the groovy 70s, when disco ruled and child labor was practically a national pastime, a 10-year-old with pigtails and a vengeance became a suburban legend. This isn't just any paper route tale. This is a story of betrayal, fury, and a shattered window that still echoes through time. Seat belts were optional, rotary phones ruled, and kids like me, barely 10 years old, were entrusted with serious jobs. Not lemonade stands or chore charts, I'm talking about actual employment, the sacred storied tradition of the paper route. Back then, it was totally normal to send a child out at the crack of dawn or the heat of afternoon, armed only with a canvas sack and the hope of earning a crisp dollar bill. Meet our tiny heroine, delivering more than just newspapers. She was serving justice, one stomp at a time. On Wednesdays, the paper was stuffed with what felt like the entire catalog of every local store and business. Within a 100-mile radius, Mrs. McKinley always gave me a warm cookie if I came by after school. Old Man Jenkins, who everyone swore was grumpy, secretly left a 50-cent tip inside a folded comic every other Friday. And the Thompson twins liked to watch me deliver from behind their curtains like I was a real-life cartoon. Those papers were thick. I'm talking back-breaking, shoulder-hunching, toe-stubbing heavy. I was earning my own money, managing my own list, and walking the streets like a tiny mayor of newspaper town. For now, imagine this chubby-cheeked kid in pigtails and corduroy pants, marching down the street like she owned it, one rolled-up paper at a time. Sure, I didn't have health benefits or a break room, but I had a sense of purpose and a sack full of newsprint. My bag would sag to my knees, and I had to do a weird waddle walk to keep from tipping over. This time, I rang the bell, rapped on the glass, even called out politely, "Paper collection." Nothing. The house looked perfectly normal from the outside: neat lawn, polished windows, cheerful wind chimes dangling from the eaves. But it was like knocking on the door of a haunted house, every sound of my tiny fist echoing into a black hole. It was like delivering bricks wrapped in ink. I dreaded it every single week. I was a kid, sure, but I was doing a job. I carried papers heavier than bricks every Wednesday. I trudged through rain and snow. Besides, I had something even better than adult intervention I had simmering, righteous fury brewing inside my corduroy-clad heart. I smiled and said, "Thank you," even when people grumbled or handed me sweaty coins. My other customers saw me as the cheerful paper kid who whistled while she walked. As I walked up their path, dollar bills jangling in my money sack from everyone else who paid promptly, I vowed to myself that today was the day. I wouldn't be brushed off. I wouldn't be ignored, and I certainly wasn't going to let them stiff me for another week. My tiny fists balled at my sides, my pigtails fluttered like battle flags in the breeze. But when I reached their block, my smile faded, my boots thudded harder on the sidewalk, and I probably looked like the angriest little gnome to ever stomp down suburban streets. The thought of their smug faces sitting inside, reading my paper for free, made my blood boil. It wasn't fair that someone could cheat me just because I was small and polite and easy to ignore. I saw one eyeball peering out at me through the gap. My paper boss wasn't exactly a gentle soul. He was a big guy with thick glasses and nicotine-stained fingers who ran the paper depot like a drill sergeant. Every Monday, he flipped through my collection book and tapped on the empty slots with a frown. That 75 cents wasn't just floating in limbo, it came out of my payout. And let me tell you, to a kid whose weekly riches usually peaked around $4, 75 cents was a lot. A tense moment passed, me with my pigtails bobbing hopefully, them squinting suspiciously. They'd wave me off or mumble about not having change. They always had some excuse. Their dog was barking, they were busy with laundry, the husband would pay later, the wife would pay tomorrow. But tomorrow never came. Week after week, I saw their smirking faces behind the window curtain. And every time I left their porch empty-handed, my cheeks burned hot with embarrassment and rage. Then the door shut again, followed by a muffled "come back tomorrow." I didn't even get a chance to say thank you. But I did come back the next day, and surprise, same routine, no answer. Sundays were for cartoons and cereal, Mondays through Saturdays, that was hustle time. My territory was your classic suburbia. Sidewalks were cracked, lawns were trimmed within an inch of their lives, and every driveway had a station wagon or a pickup in it. And on each porch, at least once a day, a neatly folded newspaper courtesy of yours truly. Buckle up for a hilarious tale of sweet corduroy-clad revenge, because when you mess with a kid's paper money, you're gonna pay. Nothing, no footsteps, no voice, just silence. I waited, maybe they were busy. I knocked again. Still nothing. I wrote a little note and tucked it in their doorframe, thinking surely they'd pay next week. I was 10, after all, hope was practically built into my DNA, literally. The 1970s were a different time. I had about 25 customers on my route, nothing fancy, just enough to keep me busy 6 days a week. The one who never answered the door, never seemed to be home, and somehow believed they could just coast along on free papers forever. On my route, that customer wasn't just a thorn in my side, they were my arch nemesis. If my route was a superhero movie, they were the shadowy villain lurking in the final act, cackling behind lace curtains and counting their ill-gotten quarters. The morning grind wasn't too bad, honestly. I'd wake up, pull on my corduroys and some probably mismatched top, grab my oversized canvas bag that swallowed my torso, and hit the pavement. Most customers were decent folk, retired couples who always waved, busy moms who appreciated the convenience, and the occasional teenage burnout who just grunted and disappeared back inside. But Friday, that was the best day of all, collection day. I'd make my rounds with a tiny book of customer names and tiny slots for their tiny debts. It was 75 cents a week, which seems laughable now, but back then, that was the economy of kings. Most folks handed me a buck with a smile and a casual "keep the change, sweetheart." And that was it, 25 cents in my pocket. You'd be shocked how fast a 10-year-old can mentally calculate gum, comics, and ice cream with that kind of cash. But then, there was Wednesday. Ah, flyer day, the bane of every young carrier's life. Still, there was something charming about it all. I'd gotten to know my customers. Even on tough days, it was my job. And at 10 years old, that kind of responsibility felt powerful. Of course, not everyone on my route was sunshine and thank you notes. But we'll get to that. Because for a while it was all innocence, all pride, and all nickels and dimes, until they stopped paying. And everything changed. Every paper route had that customer. It started out normal enough. First week, I knocked on their door on Friday, smiling and clutching my tiny book. The next Friday, I marched back to their porch, determined to collect my precious 75 cents. Week 3, they finally cracked open the door. Just a sliver. By week 4, I was starting to feel the pinch. I tried being polite, tried leaving reminders tucked into their mailbox, even tried catching them in the driveway when I saw their car pull in. It wasn't just the money. It was the principle of the thing. My parents, bless them, offered to go knock on the door for me, but no, this was my fight. By week 5, I was practically vibrating with frustration every time I neared their house. And week 6? That was the final straw. Because even at 10 years old, I knew one truth: villains never stop until you make them stop. And I was ready, so ready to make them pay. By the time week 6 rolled around, something inside me had changed. I wasn't just annoyed anymore. I was done. Done with the polite knocking. Done with the hopeful smiles. Done with being treated like I didn't matter just because I was small, cute, and had ribbons in my hair. If they thought those bows and pigtails meant I wouldn't fight back, they had another thing coming. I remember that Friday like it was burned into my brain with a branding iron. The afternoon sun beat down on the cracked sidewalk, turning the air into a haze that shimmered off car hoods and blacktop. My oversized canvas bag hung heavy on my shoulder, half empty from the day's deliveries. Tired of watching someone else smugly rid their paper for free while I scrounged nickels from the couch cushions to cover what they owed. My money sack jingled with coins and crumpled dollar bills from every other customer on my route. I could practically feel the weight of the 75 cents I wasn't going to let slip away again. My eyes landed on the window beside the door. It was tall, 6 feet high, built into the wall like some kind of decorative monument to suburban smugness. The glass glinted in the sun, perfect and unbroken. A dainty lace curtain fluttered against it like it was mocking me, daring me. Do it, it seemed to whisper. You won't. The knot in my stomach unraveled and was replaced by a fire so hot I thought it would burn through my ribs. I wanted them to hear me. I wanted the whole neighborhood to hear me. This wasn't fair. And sometimes justice looks like a broken window and a set of ribbons whipping in the wind. I stood there, stunned, staring at the jagged hole where the window had been, shards glinting like diamonds in the afternoon sun. But then, as I saw the shards glittering on their polished porch, I felt something else, a rush of righteous triumph that was bigger and hotter than the fear. They couldn't ignore this. They couldn't slam the door in my face again. They couldn't pretend I didn't matter. Because now they had a broken window, they couldn't ignore my boot print in their perfect little world. My heart thudded in my chest so hard I thought it might explode. I had earned that money fair and square, trudging through rain and wind and baking sun with that canvas bag bigger than my torso. Nobody gave me that money. I worked for it. And I was done letting them pretend I didn't exist. My face was red, my eyes were wide, and my pulse was pounding in my ears. But I didn't stop running until I was blocks away, gulping air and half laughing, half gasping at what I'd done. As I walked, I felt something harden in my chest. I kept replaying every time they'd shut the door in my face, every time they hid behind the curtain while I knocked until my knuckles were raw. And every Monday, when my paper boss tapped my little book and pulled 75 cents out of my pay with a grumble. That was the worst part. I was paying for their paper with my money. At 10 years old, 75 cents was bubble gum, was a comic book, was a frozen fudge bar from the corner store on a hot day. It wasn't just change, it was freedom. And they were stealing it from me. And for what? Because they could. Because they thought I wouldn't do anything about it? I could feel my cheeks burning as I stomped toward their house. In my head, I was a warrior princess, a pint-sized gladiator in dusty boots and corduroy pants. I looked at the polished brass doorknob, the pristine white door, the delicate lace curtain fluttering over the front window. My stomach twisted into a knot. Part of me, a big part, was still just a kid. I didn't want to get in trouble. I didn't want to make anyone mad. I had always been the good kid, the one who helped bring in groceries, the one who said yes ma'am and no sir and tried so hard to make everyone happy. My ribbons flapped behind me like battle standards. My pigtails bounced like the tails of some snarling animal ready to pounce. I didn't smile at the neighbors or wave at the Thompson twins. I was on a mission of vengeance. When I got to their porch, I paused, but I was tired of being ignored, tired of being cheated. I rang the bell. Silence. I knocked. Nothing. I pounded harder. Still nothing. And that was it. I looked around, chest heaving. Something snapped in my head. I drew my little boot back as far as I could and kicked. The crash was glorious. A shattering explosion of glass that echoed up and down the street. For a split second, I panicked. What if someone called the cops? What if the paper boss fired me? I bolted, ran down the steps, money sack bouncing against my side, ribbons streaming behind me like little victory flags. And beneath the fear, beneath the adrenaline, there was something else, a quiet little voice that whispered, "Good, they deserved it." Because sometimes even the sweetest, most polite little kid has to remind the world they're not to be messed with. The day had finally come, week 6, Friday afternoon. The day that would cement my legacy on that quiet little street forever. I woke up that morning with a strange calm in my chest. It was almost like my anger had settled into a hard little diamond, a shining certainty that today I was going to get what I was owed, or I was going to make sure they remembered me forever. I delivered the papers that day with robotic precision. My pigtails bounced with every step, my oversized bag thumped against my hip, and every customer got their paper exactly where they liked it: porches, mailboxes, stoops. Some of them even noticed something was different. I had been paid by everyone except them. And now, as the sun started to dip low, turning the neighborhood gold and orange, I set out on the last leg of my journey. I pounded until my tiny fist rattled the frame. Still nothing. My reflection wavered in the glass of the tall window beside it. I pictured their smug faces counting their quarters, reading my paper, laughing at me with my little book and my politeness. I pictured my paper boss's frown as he pulled that 75 cents out of my money again on Monday. I pictured my mom shaking her head and sighing, "That's just how some people are." Pigtails, ribbons, red cheeks, big green eyes. I looked like a kid out of a storybook, But in my chest I was a volcano. No footsteps, no annoyed voice yelling, "Just a minute." They were in there, I knew it. They were ignoring me again. Hiding, smug and satisfied, figuring I'd just go away, like always. The lace curtain fluttered uselessly in the breeze, torn and hanging limp. The perfect, pristine house had a jagged, gaping wound. And my legs took over, bolting me off that porch and down the walkway at full tilt. I ran past the maple tree, past the neighbor's fence, down the sidewalk with my money sack bouncing against my hip and my ribbons flying behind me like streamers of victory. I felt dizzy with relief, fear, triumph. Part of me couldn't believe I'd actually done it. The world just kept turning, oblivious to the tiny act of war that had just gone down on Maple Drive. I started walking again, slower this time, my pulse still racing but my steps steady. I hummed under my breath, a little triumphant tune that probably sounded half mad to anyone who might have heard it. Part of me wanted to dance right there in the street. My revenge wasn't just a shattered window, it was a message. You don't mess with me, ever. And I was done being sweet when people thought they could walk all over me. But in that moment, I didn't care. I felt powerful. I felt seen, and more than anything, I felt free. And sometimes you do it with pigtails and ribbons streaming in the wind. Another part of me felt like I was going to puke from the terror that any second someone would grab me by the collar and drag me back to face the music. They couldn't stiff me and pretend I didn't exist. I had left my mark, literally. And as I walked home that night, the ribbons in my hair bouncing with every step, I didn't feel like the sweet, polite paper girl everyone knew. I felt like a conqueror. My heart pounded in my ears so loud I couldn't hear anything else. And I stood there, chest heaving, fists balled, staring at the damage I'd done. I peeked out, expecting sirens, neighbors running, maybe the customer charging after me with a broom. But the street was quiet, the sky growing dusky. Just a shattered window glinting in the fading light. The final house. The house that had robbed me of sleep, of peace, of my 75 cents week after week. "You all right, honey?" Old Mrs. McKinley asked, peering at me with her big soft eyes as she handed me a warm cookie and my dollar. A breeze rustled the leaves of the big maple tree that shaded their perfect little yard. Their lace curtain fluttered behind the tall window beside the door, catching the fading light. The sky was streaked pink and purple, shadows lengthening across the lawns. Then the entire pane shattered with a roar. The crash so loud it startled birds out of the tree and echoed down the street like a gunshot. I bent down, brushed dust off my scuffed boots, and looked at the window again. For one tiny second, doubt flashed in my mind. What if I got in trouble? What if I had to pay for the window? What if my parents found out? But the doubt flickered out as fast as it came. This wasn't about rules anymore. This was about justice. I could practically hear the dramatic music swell in my head like the theme song of some gritty western. This was it. 6 feet tall, the glass polished and gleaming, delicate lace curtains behind it. A symbol of their tidy little world where they could cheat me and never pay the price. The showdown. "Fine, ma'am," I chirped, but I'm sure my smile looked more like a snarl. By the time I reached the end of the route, my money sack was pleasantly heavy with crumpled bills and clinking coins. As I turned onto their block, the air seemed to grow still. I paused at the edge of their walkway and took a deep breath. My heart thudded so hard in my chest I could feel it in my fingertips. I adjusted the strap of my canvas bag on my shoulder, tightened my grip on my money sack, and walked up the path with the steady, deliberate tread of a tiny warrior marching into battle. I rang the doorbell. Once. Twice. 3 times. The chime echoed inside, muffled by walls and silence. I could hear the soft whir of a fan, maybe a creak of floorboards, but otherwise nothing. I knocked, lightly at first, then harder. My knuckles stung against the wood, but I didn't stop. I stood there, breathing hard, staring at the door. My mind raced. I wasn't going to let it happen again. I glanced around. The street was empty. Everyone was inside making dinner, watching TV, minding their own business. It was almost too perfect, that window. I drew my foot back. And so I kicked. My boot smashed into the glass with a crack that felt like lightning shooting up my leg. Time seemed to freeze. Tiny shards of glass rained down on the porch, catching the sunset and scattering light in every direction. It was beautiful. Then the adrenaline hit. My eyes went wide, my breath came in ragged gasps. I didn't stop running until I was 3 blocks away, crouched behind the low brick wall of the Johnsons' garden. I pressed a hand over my mouth to stifle the giggles bubbling up in my throat, but no one came, no one even seemed to notice. After a while, I stood up, dusted off my corduroys, and slipped my money sack into my canvas bag. I knew there'd be consequences. Maybe the paper boss would find out, maybe they'd complain. Maybe my parents would hear from them. Because they couldn't ignore me anymore. And I couldn't wait to see the look on their face when they opened that stern letter from the paper company in a few days. I was done being ignored. I was done being cheated. Sometimes you have to break a little glass to get paid. The next morning, my heart still thudded in my chest every time I thought about that shattered window. But I wasn't finished. The boot had delivered my first message, but I wanted to make sure they never dared cheat me or any other paper kid again. So, I did what any tiny general would do. I called in the reinforcements. I waited until my dad left for work and my mom was busy in the kitchen. Then I picked up our heavy rotary phone, dialed the number of the paper depot, and waited as the line clicked and buzzed. Finally, the gruff voice of my paper boss crackled through the receiver. "Yeah, what? Give me the address again." I took a deep breath and used my sweetest, steadiest voice. "Hi, sir. This is your name. Wrote 14. I wanted to report a non-paying customer." Again, he grunted. "Same one?" He scribbled it down, muttering under his breath. "Fine. I'll send them the letter. Stop delivery until they pay." Sure, I was just a kid with pigtails and boots, but I had the full weight of the newspaper company behind me. It wasn't just about the broken window anymore. I wanted them to know I had options. That I was done playing nice. That I could go through channels, follow rules, and still come out on top. They wouldn't just ignore a little girl anymore, now they'd have to answer to the corporation. You got that? And either way, you win. It was a bright Tuesday afternoon, the sun beating down on the sidewalk as I marched along with my bag. She was waiting by her mailbox. Arms folded tight across her chest, lips pressed into a thin, angry line. "Oh, hi, ma'am, your window broke?" "Oh no, I'm so sorry." "That must be terrible." She wore curlers in her hair and a floral house dress, but there was nothing soft about the way she glared at me. "I know it was you. You and your filthy little boots. You think you're clever, don't you?" she hissed. "Oh, ma'am, I don't know anything about a broken window. But I do know that the paper boss said you have to pay me before you get another paper. Otherwise, you'll have to get yours from the store. That's just the rules." I chirped. "You think you can just smash my window and then come skipping around like you re some perfect little angel? Well, I'm going to report you. You hear me?" But she also never got another paper delivered to her door. And sometimes you just smile so sweet it makes your enemy choke on their own bitterness. Every morning when I passed her house, I'd see her glaring out the window at me, probably stewing about how she had to drag herself to the store if she wanted the news. And every time I'd wave, smile bright as sunshine, and keep on walking. "I'm going to make sure you lose this job." Her eyes were cold, narrowed, calculating. She'd been expecting me. "Oh my gosh, really? That sounds awful. By the way, did you get a letter from the paper company? They said you weren't paying your bill." And Money Sack, whistling a little tune that was half triumphant, half daring the universe to test me again. I marched right up the sidewalk, humming louder, practically skipping. For a second, she looked like she wanted to slap me, but then she just huffed, shoulders shaking with fury. "This isn't over," she growled. "You think you're so clever, but you're going to get yours. You wait and see." Now, the tables had turned. She was the one waiting on me. She was the one raging at the universe because she wasn't getting what she wanted. And me? I was just the sweet little paper girl with ribbons in my hair and a song on my lips. Her mouth twitched when she saw me coming, like she was chewing on something sour. "Yes, sir," I said, twisting the cord around my finger. "Oh, okay. Well, let me know when you're ready to pay." "Have a super day," I chirped, then turned on my heel and skipped down the sidewalk, humming a happy little tune. Their front window was covered with plywood and ugly bandage on their perfect facade. I felt like a queen. My heart was still racing, but I couldn't wipe the grin off my face if I tried. And soon they'd find the letter in their mailbox, the cold authority of the paper boss backing me up. It felt like justice, sweet and undeniable. I'd seen one before when another kid on my route complained about a deadbeat customer. It was stern, black and white, practically legalese. It had words like final notice and service suspension and delinquent. "Did you break my window, you little brat?" Even adults quaked a little when they saw the bold red stamp at the top. "It's been 6 weeks. They haven't paid me a dime, and I don't want to deliver there anymore until they do." My boss didn't have time for frills or apologies. If someone didn't pay, they got one chance. Then they got the letter, a cold, official notice from the paper company itself, telling them they owed money and wouldn't get another scrap of newsprint until they paid up. There was a pause, the faint sound of paper rustling on the other end. Then he sighed. "All right, kid." I rattled it off with the precision of someone who de-etched it into their brain with fire and fury. "Yes, sir," I said, relief flooding me. "Thank you," he grunted again, and the line went dead. That was how it worked in the newspaper business. Short, curt, no nonsense. And let me tell you, the letter wasn't pretty. That was the power of the system. And as I hung up the phone, I felt another layer of that tension in my chest slip away. By the time I headed out on my route again the next day, I didn't even glance at their house. Because even at 10 years old, I knew sometimes you break a window, and sometimes you break their pride with bureaucracy. It didn't take long. Just a few days after the window shattered and the letter landed in their mailbox, she came for me. I spotted her the moment I turned onto her block. My stomach did a quick somersault, but I didn't slow down. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction. "You!" she spat, before I could even say hello. I blinked my big green eyes and tilted my head just so, ribbons fluttering in the breeze. "Don't play innocent with me," she snapped, stepping forward so fast I had to clutch my bag tighter to keep from stumbling back. I tried to look shocked, pressing my free hand to my mouth. Her face went bright red, a vein pulsing at her temple. I tilted my head the other way, giving her the biggest, most sugary smile I could muster. Her jaw clenched so tight I thought her teeth might crack. I let my eyes go wide and innocent, practically shining in the sun. Behind me, I heard her muttering curses under her breath, but I didn't look back. For weeks I'd been the one pounding on her door, begging for scraps, praying she'd pay me. The best part? She never did pay me, not really. Because in the end there are a lot of ways to win. Sometimes you smash a window. Sometimes you call in the big bosses. And that was a lesson I never forgot. For weeks after my little outburst, the house at the end of the block stood out like a sore thumb. Where there had once been a pristine 6-foot window with delicate lace curtains, there was now a jagged sheet of plywood nailed into the frame, rough and splintered like a scar that refused to heal. Oh, they never actually paid me for those weeks they owed. But they sure never looked me in the eye, never dared open the door again with a smirk, never once tried to bully me or brush me off. In fact, they never ordered another paper from me at all. They got theirs from the corner store like every other non-paying mooch in the neighborhood. It was ugly, loud, and unmistakable. Every kid, every neighbor, every passing dog walker saw it and wondered what had happened. It was a reminder that justice comes in many forms and sometimes it's delivered by a boot. But back then, in the deep dark days of the 70s, I was also something else. A little avenger, a defender of my own tiny empire, and a kid who never let anyone steal from her twice. And the best part? They never tried to stiff me again. I learned that people could ignore you, underestimate you, brush you off until you make them pay attention. This story reminds us that even the smallest warrior can leave the biggest impact. Got your own revenge tale from the good old days? Drop it in the comments. Hit like if you ever wanted to kick a window. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories of petty perfection. Sometimes that means standing up and refusing to be walked over. Sometimes it means using the system against them. And sometimes, when all else fails, it means kicking out a damn window. Every time I passed their house on my route, I'd see that patch of plywood and feel a little jolt of satisfaction in my chest. I was still small, still polite, still liked my cookies from Mrs. McKinley, but underneath there was steel. And the world would learn not to mistake my softness for weakness. Some mornings, I'd even wave to the window as I walked by, pigtails bouncing. and dollar tips jangling in my money sack, while they hid behind the curtain and pretended not to see me. It wasn't exactly perfect justice. I never got my 75 cents back. But I got something better, a sense of my own power. My customers paid on time, or they got the letter. And me? I kept delivering, kept smiling, kept collecting those hard-earned tips. That was the moment I stopped seeing myself as just the cute little kid with the ribbons. I never broke another window after that. Didn't need to. Word kind of got around I was the kid who wouldn't be messed with. And every Friday when I counted my dollars and polished my quarters like tiny trophies, I remembered that house with the broken window, the plywood patch, and the woman's shocked, angry face. So maybe I was just a 10-year-old with ribbons and big green eyes. I never broke another window, but I always got paid. Justice comes in many forms. Sometimes it's a gavel, sometimes it's a high-velocity boot from a tiny foot.